file this under kinda sorta good news. BP officials have raised the possibility they might be able to cap the broken well that has been spewing oil into the Gulf of Mexico for 80 days, earlier than they thought. BP's managing director Bob Dudley says relief wells might be finished as early as July 27th, well ahead of the mid-August timeline they've been operating under so far. But the oil spewing into the Gulf of Mexico right now is only half the story here. And it's only a teeny tiny fraction of the crisis. A few weeks ago, I was down on the Gulf Coast, and I was eating at a seafood restaurant in Houma, Louisiana, with a scientist who's been surveying the oil on the Louisiana coast. And he told me something really striking. He said the Gulf Coast can probably survive the BP oil disaster. What it can't survive is a 3-foot rise in the sea level. What it can't survive is a climate change disaster. He said the problem is not the oil from the BP Deepwater Horizon spill. The problem is every other drop of oil on Earth. It's every barrel we burn, every molecule of carbon we put into the air. But at the same time as we're all watching this painful reminder of the cost of our dependence on oil, the cost of our energy crisis, there is one piece of legislation that could save the Gulf Coast in the long run. And it's on life support right now. It's not quite dead yet, but is in the process of being killed by the same oil interests we've come to be so outraged by because of what's happening right now in the Gulf. In other words, there is a second oil disaster here. Just as everyone's watching the oil spill disaster unfold day after day on the Gulf Coast, there is an oil policy disaster unfolding in our nation's capital. But it's not too late. A real climate change bill passed the House last year, and there's one on the Senate floor right now. And if there's one single piece of legislation that we, as a country, will look back on in 100 years, that the residents of the Gulf Coast will look back on in 100 years, as having preserved this region of the country, it's this bill. And in political terms, you'd think a bill like that would have a really, really good chance of passing right about now. You know, what with everyone in the country watching the slow motion assault by the oil industry on 40% of our nation's wetlands, and nearly $2.5 billion chunk of the country's seafood industry live on TV every day. Turns out, not so much. Because somehow, not everyone is on board with the fairly straightforward logic that suggests the appropriate response to a massive crisis caused by oil might be a measure designed to reduce the amount of oil we use. Even as oil continues to spew into the Gulf of Mexico from an underground gusher 50 miles off the Louisiana coast, Republicans in Congress continue full speed ahead with their effort to kill the one piece of legislation that could effectively reduce our dependence on oil and stave off the much, much bigger oil crisis that comes in a package deal with global warming.
National energy tax. They call it a climate bill. What it is a national energy tax. But I can pretty confidently tell you a bipartisan majority of the Senate are not going to buy that.
It's been dead for a year. I think it's still dead. And no matter which way they move, they're not going to have the votes to pass it.
I will work with the president, Democrats, and Republicans to come up with an energy policy, but I'm not going to do it in the middle of an oil spill where the political environment doesn't favor what I want. I'm not going to do it between now and November where an oil spill dominates the politics and the headlines.
Well, what's happening here is that the president and some liberals here in Congress want to use this disaster as an excuse for imposing their cap-and-trade national energy tax on America.
While we're trying to clean up an oil spill and while we're trying to create jobs in this country, is no time to put a national energy tax on the production of energy in the United States.
President Obama made it clear that he intends to exploit this crisis to push his liberal agenda for a cap-and-tax scheme.
Can I just ask you a climate change question?
Yeah.
That's John McCain, hero and brave maverick walking away. Joining us now is Dave Roberts, staff writer for grist.org. It's a wonderful site. I get a lot of my environmental news from there. David, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So let's just talk about where this energy bill, the John Kerry, Joe Lieberman bill, stand right now. Is there a chance it could pass?
There's very little chance at this point that the Kerry-Lieberman bill could pass. What's happening is there's a number of bills on the table right now from Kerry and Lieberman, from Lugar, from Collins and Snow, that a number of senators have put forward various bills. There's sort of a buffet out right now, and what's going to happen is Harry Reid is going to go and cobble pieces together from these various bills and assemble a bill of his own and introduce that in the next week or two.
That assembled Frankenstein bill that is built out of the different plates in the buffet. If it's not Kerry Lieberman, does that mean there's no carbon tax with it? Is there not going to be a price on carbon?
Well, no one knows for sure, but the general conventional wisdom right now is that the full